Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be jumping into 8 broken and powerful builds in Elden Ring. These are really fun too. A lot of these, again, are build requests from you guys, and of course, if you have any more, be sure to comment them below. We're going to start here with Cold Storm. And we are using the Great Katana in Cold Affinity with Stormcaller here, and we're going to buff a fair bit for a lot of these builds as well. We're using Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, Flame Grant Me Strength, and then we are also using the Bloodsucking Cracked here for a lot of these builds for extra damage. With the Full Ash of War there, we would have gotten around 18,000 damage, and of course you're going to get some Frost procs with this build too. All around a really fun build, and one I recommend trying out if you're looking for a powerful cold build that involves storms. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And we have the Great Katana in Cold Affinity with Stormcaller, any seal for buffs, Rakshasa set, Divine Beast Head-On, Enraged Divine Beast Talisman, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Magic Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander. We have the Thorny tier, Blood-Sucking Crack tier, and we're using Sleeping Pots there. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 30 Endurance, we have 19 Strength, 59 Dexterity, a little extra points with the Divine Beast Head Helm on. We have 20 Intelligence, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessing's Boon. Now, we're going in the order, by the way, of the least powerful ones to the most powerful ones. This one's kind of in between. This was a requested build. This is a Dragon Fighter build. Does a lot of damage with incantations, though not as much with the side weapon. Of course, we're going to be using Dane's Footwork here to make our Dragon Fighter. And of course, we have it in Blood Affinity to proc Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which is an extra 20% that adds on when this procs, by the way, because it's generic damage. You can then use different incantations for extra damage on top of an already mixed kind of hybrid build. And of course, we're using Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, which has the potential for massive damage. Let's see how much we get here. And the Fire Giant really was pretty much only 2 Ancient Dragon Lightning Strikes and a little bit of kicking overall. This is a really fun one that mixes in fighting skills with lightning. By the way, if you saw the new trailer for the upcoming roguelike Elden Ring game, the new Elden Ring game that's going to be coming out in 2025, and you have any opinions about it, I asked this in my last video, I'll ask in this one too. Be sure to comment those as well. In a second, we're going to go over equipment, stats, and the buffing order for this build. And we have Dane's Blood Footwork plus 25. We have the Dragon Communion Seal plus 10. We have the Gravelstone Seal in the offhand for the boost. Shard of Alexander, Shattered Stone Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Blood-Sucking Crack tier. We have the Lightning tier. And of course, we are using the Priestess Heart for this build to boost Dragon Cult incantations. Let's jump right into stats. And we have 50 Vigor for this one, 20 Mind, 22 Endurance. We have 12 Strength, 30 Dexterity, we have 36 Faith, and 50 Arcane. This is a Faith and Arcane build. Of course, we have 0 Poise because we are using the Priestess Heart, and you can't use armor with this. We have Golden Vow, Howl of Shabiri, Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, Knight's Lightning Spear, and Blessing's Boon as well. Blessing's Boon, or Blessings of the Erdtree, if you have enough faith for it, is always recommended when you're using the Blood-Sucking Crack tier to offset some of it. For our first buff, we're going to use Blessing's Boon, then Golden Vow. They're both around 2 minutes, so you want to use those ones first. Then we're going to fill up our FP. You need to use the Priestess Heart a second time for the buff. Then we're going to drink our tier. And lastly, we're going to use Howl of Shabiri. A lot of buffing here to give you massive damage with Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, as well as decent damage with Dane's Footwork as well. That's going to be your side weapon, but all in all, a cool build for a Dragon Fighter. And next up here, we have a build for the Lucerne, if that's how you say it. I have no idea how to say it. Some of the pronunciation, I apologize for it, because some of these I'm not great with. But at the end of the day, this is a halberd-like weapon, and it does a lot of damage with repeating thrust, and it's a Dex and Arcane weapon when you use Blood Affinity. This was another build request, and it can be powerful too, because you get around 130 bleed build-up, you get a decent move set, and of course you have a ton of range as well when you're using repeating thrust. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And we have the Blood Lucerne plus 25 preferably, repeating thrust, Dragon Communion Seal, Rakshasa set, and the White Mask. We have the Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have Maleficent's Prosthesis, Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia is better if you have it. Blood-Sucking Crack tier, Thorny tier, and of course there we were using Margit's Shackle to stun the boss. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 55 Vigor, 14 Mind, 27 Endurance, 14 Strength, 45 Dexterity, and 45 Arcane. We have 25 Faith with the Faith tier so that we can use our buffs, and we're going to go over the buffing order and the buffs we're using right now. And first things first, we are going to use either Golden Vow or Blessing's Boon. They're both pretty long. Then we're going to use Blessing's Boon. We use Golden Vow first in this case. Then we're going to fill up our FP. Then we're going to drink our tier. Lastly, we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength because it's the shortest, and we want to go from longest to shortest. And then, of course, we're using Repeating Thrust. Next up, we have a build for the Rivers of Blood. Somebody requested a high-level build for the Rivers of Blood. I'll go over what stats to use if you're at a higher level, but I decided to do a revamped build for this weapon specifically because it's still a lot of fun to use, and when combined with the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, you can get a lot of damage out of this weapon. A good amount of bleed buildup, a good amount of fire and physical damage. It's not as good as its launch days. For anyone that remembers how the Rivers of Blood launched, it was an incredible, ridiculous weapon that was so broken. And yeah, it's not as broken as it used to be, but it could still be pretty broken overall. You could still get a decent amount of damage out of it. And honestly, if you're at a high level, if you're at a really high level and you're using the Rivers of Blood, it can absolutely shred with high dexterity and high arcane. And even at 150, it's by no means a bad weapon with the split between dexterity and arcane. You get a decent amount of bleed buildup, physical damage, fire damage. There's a lot to like still about the Rivers of Blood. In a second here, going over equipment, stats, everything you need to know, and then the buffing order. Yeah, still a weapon that you could absolutely do some damage with. We have the Rivers of Blood plus 10, Dragon Communion Seal plus 10. We have Rakshasa set on and the White Mask. We have the Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have Millicent's Prosthesis, Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia is better if you have it, Blood-Sucking Crack tier, Thorny tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 55 Vigor, 14 Mind, 27 Endurance, 14 Strength, 45 Dexterity, 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We kept the same stats for a couple of the Dexterity and Arcane builds. I am going to go over the buffing order now. And for our buffing order, we are going to use Golden Vow first here, and that's going to give us 15% more attack and defense, by the way. Blessing's Boon to negate some of the Blood-Sucking Crack tier. We are going to fill up our FP. Then we're going to use our Wondrous Physic, which has the Blood-Sucking Crack tier in it and the Thorny tier. Lastly, of course, Flame Grant Me Strength, because it's the shortest duration buff. And all in all, you're going to end up with a really powerful build for the Rivers of Blood. If you're at a high level, go for 80 Dexterity and Arcane. And next up, we have a Zweihander Paladin type build with Sacred Blade that also builds around using the charge attacks for massive damage. This is one of those builds that could be hugely helpful for you in DLC, since there's a lot of bosses in DLC that are weak to holy damage. And this is a fun one to use too, that'll give you between 850 and 900 AR with the Zweihander, however you say it. I say it wrong every time. I know, guys, people have corrected me on some of the pronunciation. I just forget. Some of the weapons are not English names. And of course, my pronunciation, as I mentioned with some of them, is just not great overall, and I have a hard time sometimes remembering how they're pronounced. At the end of the day, though, they're still really good builds for these weapons. We have the Sacred Zweihander. This was another requested one, plus 25 preferably. Erdtree Seal, Rakshasa set, Axe Talisman, Two-Handed Sword Talisman. We have the Sacred Scorpion Charm. We have the Shard of Alexander. And then for our tier, we have the Holy tier, Blood-Sucking Crack tier. Let's jump into stats. And for our stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 28 Endurance, 19 Strength, 14 Dexterity. We have 70 Faith for this build. Our buffs are Golden Vow, House Shabriri, and Blessings of the Erdtree. In a second here, we are going to go over the buffing order for this build. And for our buffs, we are first going to use Golden Vow, which is going to give us 15% more attack and defense. Then Blessings of the Erdtree for some extra healing that's going to help offset the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, fill up our FP, use our Wondrous Physic, and then lastly, House Shabriri, which gives us 25% more generic damage, and then you can buff your weapon with holy damage. The next one we have up here is a revamped build for the fire jumps that does a lot of damage. And I decided to throw this one in here because this is one of my favorite builds that I've ever made. These use 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Flame Art Affinity. You'll get a B in scaling on Faith for both and around 730 AR on each one. If you're at a really high level and you have 99 faith, you'll have around 750 to 770 AR in each one after you activate Flaming Strike on each weapon, of course. We'll go over the buffing order at the end for this one too, and I'll explain how to activate each one because some people get confused, I think, about the buttons and how to two-hand the offhand one. Here on the jumps, though, we're going to end up with a lot of damage. The fire damage is quite good, and the successive attack damage buildup is solid as well on this one. Yeah, all around, one of my favorite builds to run in Elden Ring. You can get 2 Bandit Curve Swords really early, by the way, and the Flaming Strike Astrovore, you can get that early too at Redmane Castle and Caelid. You can actually start building this relatively early in the game and ultimately end up with a lot of damage for these 2 weapons. The Bandit Curve Swords are also something you could switch to Blood Affinity, which we're going to show a build off for later, and absolutely shred that way too. A lot of damage there, a lot of fire damage overall. And of course, you have a Faith build, so you're going to have a lot of versatility as well if you want to add in different incantations and add onto the build. Let's jump into equipment, stats, and then the buffing order. And we have 2 Flame Art Bandit Curve Swords with Flaming Strike. We have the Erdtree Seal, part of the Rakshasa set, and the Gravebird chest piece on for the extra jump attack damage, Claw Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ballistance Prosthesis, Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia if you have it is better, Bloodsucking Crack Tier, Flame Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 30 Endurance, 13 Strength, 18 Dexterity, 75 Faith, and we are using Golden Vow, Halshaburi, and Blessing's Boon. Second here, we're going to go over the buffing order, and I'm going to explain how to two-hand the offhand one, basically to activate each Ash of War, and what buffs to use in what order. And first things first, we're going to use Golden Vow, once again, decently long, 15% more attack and defense, then Blessing's Boon, then we're going to fill up our FP. Then we want to use our tier, then we're going to have to use Halshaburi the way this is set up, and then of course now we want to two-hand the offhand one on Xbox, that would be Y and LB, and then I believe it's Y and RB back. You have to follow up the Ash of War with the right trigger, or R2 on PlayStation. The next one here is the Bloodfiend's Arm build, another requested one, and this one is definitely broken because this weapon is incredibly powerful. We're going to be using this in Blood Affinity. We're going to be using Endure too, so we could take some extra damage. That's going to be hugely helpful, and we're going to be mainly using the charge attacks to get in posture damage, and as you can see there, break Mesmer completely. A lot of damage there. We're able to get in a critical break too. This is a really powerful build. And of course, we're going to do more damage there. 11,000 damage on that hit. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, Bloodfiend's Arm is something that can carry you through a lot of the bosses in DLC, and it could absolutely beat the living crap out of the base game bosses. They don't even stand a chance. I feel like the base game is so much easier after DLC. Like, after you go through DLC and you go back to the base game, every single boss, even the ones that we once thought were tough, they're just so much easier than they used to be. The only exception I would probably say is Millennia. She's the only one that I would say still can give me a hard time because Waterfowl is really difficult to dodge. But aside from her, like the Fire Giant, Malakoth, etc., a lot of them, even Godfrey, got so much easier. Elden Beast is basically a joke now. By the way, the better version of Pest Threads absolutely shreds them. And we have Bloodfiend's Arm, plus 25, and Blood Affinity. And we have Endure on it, Dragon Communion Seal, Rakshasa Set, White Mask, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Axe Talisman, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Blade of Mercy for some extra damage after you get critical breaks. And then we have the Bloodsucking Crack Tier and the Spike Crack Tier. Let's jump right into stats for this build. And we have 55 Vigor, 15 Mind, 28 Endurance. We have 40 Strength. That's going to be 60 Strength. When you two-hand, you get a 1.5 times bonus. We have 12 Dexterity, 25 Faith, 45 Arcane. We're going to go over the buffing order now. And the buffing order for this one's not too complicated. We are going to use Blessing's Boon or Golden Vow first. Either one's good. Then we're going to use Golden Vow. They're both relatively long. Then we're going to fill up our FP. Then we are going to use our Wondrous Physic. And lastly, we're going to use Flame Grip Me Strength, because once again, that's only 30 seconds. Then you want to use Endure and your charged attacks. And next up and last up, we have a build for the Blood Bandit Curve Sword. I know people love this build, so I decided to do another revamped version with the Bloodsucking Crack Tier, see how much damage we can get. And we end up absolutely shredding the final boss of the DLC. It ends up being incredible. I think he goes down in around 45 seconds. This is New Game Plus 2 Journey 3 with DLC Plus. overall, he ends up being absolutely destroyed by our powerful bleed build. Yeah, certainly one of the quicker fights with Concert Radon. He did get me once or twice. I think I got him on maybe the third or fourth try overall, but not too bad. This is definitely one of those builds you could take him on and absolutely destroy him. He may not even get a chance to use his meteor at the end, which is hugely helpful. And goodbye, Radon. Probably a total of around, I don't know, 8 jump attacks or so. Not too bad. The Blood Bandit Curved Sword, by the way, good at 150. If you're at max level, it's actually the best bleed build for max level on high levels in pretty much all of Elden Ring. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know, and then of course the buffing order too. And for equipment, we have 2 Blood Bandit Curved Swords with Seppuku on them. We have the Dragon Communion Seal. We have the White Mask, the Gravebird chest piece, and part of the Rakshasa set on. And then we have the Claw Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have Maleficent's Prosthesis, Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia if you have it's better. Bloodsucking Crack Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into stats. And we have 55 Vigor, 14 Mind, 27 Endurance, 14 Strength. We have 45 Dexterity and 45 Arcane, 25 Faith. In a second here, we're going to go over the buffing order and all of that. But of course, we're using Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, and Flame Grant Me Strength. If you're at a high level, by the way, 80 Strength, 80 Dexterity, 80 Arcane. There's not a single other Blood Affinity, Jump Attack, Curved Sword, or Twin Blade bleed build that will have higher AR. First, we're going to use Golden Vow, then Blessing's Boon, then we're going to fill up our FP, then we're going to drink our Wondrous Physic. Lastly, Flame Grant Me Strength, because again, only 30 seconds. Then Y and LB, and then Y and RB back, because you want to activate Seppuku on both, and you'll get that extra bleed scaling, a lot of bleed damage, a lot of damage in general, and a solid build. And thanks for watching this one. I appreciate you tuning into my top 8 new broken builds to try in Elden Ring. If you're really enjoying Elden Ring, or you're new to Elden Ring, be sure to check out my channel. There's a ton of content on there, and be sure to sub as well. Yeah, my channel's really organized, by the way. A lot of people ask me for beginner guides and whatnot. All you have to do is scroll over to my channel and then scroll to the bottom, and all the beginner guides are in a playlist. Everything's in playlist and everything's organized. I will catch you guys in the next video.